Well, there's been a lot of talk throughout this election campaign about mining, jobs and transition. And of course that puts a keen spotlight on our neck of the woods. The seat of Hunter, with a margin of just 3% at the last election, certainly has all parties and independents vying for your vote. But how does the mining industry feel with all these discussions happening, often at a national level? Are they being taken along as part of these discussions? I caught up with Stephen Galilee. He's the head of the New South Wales Minerals Council, and we started by speaking a bit about a new report that's just been released.
We've found through our economic survey data over the past decade that our member companies have directly spent over $120 billion in New South Wales over the past 10 years, and over $50 billion of that direct spending has been in the Hunter. We've also seen an increase in the number of jobs supported by our member companies from around 20,000 10 years ago to around 30,000 now, including over 14,000 jobs here in the Hunter. And the number of supplier businesses across New South Wales that have been supported by the industry over that time has fluctuated between 7,000 and 8,000 across New South Wales, with nearly half of those usually located in the Hunter as well. So over $120 billion of direct spending on wages and salaries and on business purchases across the past 10 years, supporting those tens of thousands of jobs, helping those thousands of supplier businesses, is a big economic contribution and a reminder of the importance of mining as an issue at the next federal election.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously are in full election mode with less than a fortnight now to voting day. Early voting's already started. What power do you see, mine workers in the Hunter playing in obviously the Hunter's decision, but maybe a bigger influence as well?
Well, there are three very tight electorates in the Hunter, and those three electorates have very significant numbers of mining workers. Obviously, the electorate of Hunter, with over 7,000 mining workers and their families on a very tight margin. The adjacent seat of Paterson, as well as the adjacent seat of Shortland, also have significant coal mining communities in their electorates. And those people will ultimately make their voting decisions based on a range of issues, but I'm sure many of them will be weighing up the respective policies of the different parties and candidates in relation to the industry that they work in and that so many others rely upon in the region.
On that, Steve, has there been any policy proposals that have really piqued your interest throughout this campaign?
Well, ultimately, the people that live in those electorates are smart enough to make the right decision about who is the best to represent them for their future. And they'll make those decisions, like most of us do, based on their views in relation to a range of issues. But there have been some significant policy announcements made locally in those three electorates. There's been some national announcements made in relation to how the industry will be treated in relation to the emissions policies of the major parties. And in the end, while the industry has never been stronger than it is right now, we've got record coal prices. They've never been higher. We've got higher job numbers across the industry now than we've had for some time. And we've got significant levels of spending going on by the member companies as well, and very strong export demand through the Port of Newcastle. This industry is in a very strong position right now, and people that work in the industry, I'm sure, are weighing up what the impact of the respective policies of the various candidates are going to have on the next period for the industry post this federal election. It's an important election for the future of our sector.
And looking at this latest report that you have released today, Stephen, $15 billion in mining royalties back, that's New South Wales alone. Are we seeing enough of it coming back throughout this election in terms of commitments to mining communities?
Well, I've been in this job now for over 10 years, and that is an issue that has regularly been raised with me during the time that I've spent in the Hunter region. And it is a fair question to be asked. I mean, the Hunter does make a big contribution to the sector overall. The Hunter is contributing significant coal volumes which generate those royalties, and those royalty revenues have never been higher. We're expected to deliver almost $3 billion in royalties to the New South Wales government in this current financial year. There has been some progress. There have been some significant infrastructure announcements made in previous years. We do have big projects that are promised and we have seen resources for regions from the New South Wales government increase its funding commitment over that decade as well, which is very welcome, and now a $75 million contribution made across the state, most of it in the Hunter. We've seen royalties for rejuvenation, the program announced by the state government last year as well, which is also welcome, but there's always more that can be done, and there's absolutely no reason why it's not a good time for local mayors and those local communities to be asking their candidates for bigger commitments and for more funding.
And just coming back to the emissions target, Steve, do you feel that the industry has been taken along, I guess, in a proactive approach through these discussions and looking at the targets together with politicians, whether it's candidates or those in power now?
Well, the industry knows that it has a role to play in reducing emissions overall, and we have seen here in New South Wales fugitive emissions from coal mines fall by nearly 40% since 2005. So that shows that we are playing our part in reducing our emissions that are generated here in New South Wales as part of those coal mining operations, and that's something that we understand needs to continue. It is fair to say there has been some concern expressed in some parts of the industry about some of the consultation or lack of consultation that has occurred in relation to the possible impact of the Labor Party's policies on the industry going forward. And we would hope that if the Labor Party is successful at this election, that they will sit down with the industry, and not just the business peak bodies, but with the industry peak bodies that are going to be most affected and the companies that are going to be most affected, and talk through the details and work out the arrangements that are going to be fair on our export industries, because we can only take at face value the commitments that we've been given, that our export industries, like other export industries, won't be disadvantaged by the Labor Party's emissions policies. That's the commitment that they've made, and we'll take them at face value, but the details will need to be worked out after the election if they're successful.
Stephen Galilee there, he's the head of the New South Wales Minerals Council, and his thoughts on how the campaign's been going. You'll see a fair bit in the news today. I'm looking at the telly at the minute, and you'll hear more about the last leaders' debate that was held overnight. 16% of voters there were still undecided at the end. Maybe that's where you are as well. You can always send a text to us here at ABC Upper Hunter, 0487 99 12 33. It's 23 past 7.